Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some of the most useless gods, minor gods, in Age of Mythology Retold. For the sake of this video, I'm going to use a cheat over here in order to... wait, not that one, in order to make a demonstration purposes. And the gods that I'm talking about are, of course, Ptah and Leto. So let's consider Ptah. Beyond the fact that you would lose Bast or Anubis with their significantly better power, like Eclipse, for instance, the food benefit that Bast provides, or with Anubis, the 25% favor generation. By the way, this sheet allows workers to instantly gather resources, by the way. So you're losing that for a guy who has a useless ability, Shifting Sands, a not-so-great myth unit, and 4 upgrades that are not really going to add all that much, considering the current multiplayer meta. So let's just consider how things actually are right now. The Wadjet is one of the slowest units you can get over here. So it's slower, it's about the same speed as a worker, of course. So, but it's slower than a pharaoh. It is faster than a priest, for what that's worth. But it's slower than any other human unit that you can get in Age 2. So it's slower than an axeman, it's slower than a spearman, much slower than a spearman, slower than a slinger. So that's a problem. Because a lot of games right now are taking place within that kind of situation where early aggression and fast movement speed is important. Now you can talk about like the downside of priests, but obviously priests have more on offer than just, you know, more on offer than just their regular combat damage. They obviously can scout, they obviously can pick up relics, and they have that bonus damage against myth units. But it's certainly an issue for them. But yeah, the Wadjet is not, compared to the Anubite, and even compared to the Higher Sphinx, is not that great. Then you get an upgrade over here that reduces the cost of farms and their build time by 50%. So farm by default has a 10-second build time, so we're saving out 5 seconds and a 70 gold cost. So you're reducing your farms to 35 gold 5 seconds. That might be a bit useful for Rob, but given the context of multiplayer games right now, it's just not really a great upgrade. And then, of course, we have the combat benefits for slingers, spearmen, and axemen. So let's start with the spearmen. The spearman one is gonna reduce the vulnerability to pierce attacks by 15%. So we have a 15% pierce attack benefit, so it's gonna give you 28% over there. Pretty decent. Never mind the fact that spearmen aren't particularly great as units, but still, that is decent enough. Whether or not it's worth, you know, sacrificing other things is a different discussion. But, you know, regular shields can give you 10% as well. The axe benefit, 15% attack to all types, melee attack damage. So a regular axeman with no upgrades has 5 damage. We upgrade that, it goes to 5.8. And even if we, you know, pick up bronze weapons, we're looking like axeman damage is not a great amount of damage. Then slingers, it adds 1 divine damage to slingers. That is actually far more useful, to be sure, right? Because like we get medium slingers, we get to this, we're looking at 1 divine damage, which is going to ignore armor. So I would say that's the most useful upgrade, and it might make slingers useful. But I don't think anyone who's playing multiplayer right now seriously is actually using freaking Ptah. Part of the reason behind that is because if you're playing multiplayer right now, what you want to do as the Egyptians, your game plan as the Egyptians, is to get to the heroic age and start pumping out camels, chariot archers, war elephants, you know, all that. And say what you will about the slinger versus a chariot archer. Consider this. A slinger is cheaper than a chariot archer, much cheaper. But it's nowhere near as fast. It doesn't do anywhere near the level of damage, even with those upgrades. And same can be said, you know, for the other ones. You know, you look at Camel. It's 110 resources, obviously, versus almost 70, basically. Or, yeah, pretty much. 70 resources over there. Much more useful unit. And compared to, you know, camel riders versus spearmen, sure. Again, more expensive, to be sure, but a far more useful unit, a far faster unit than infantry units. And if you're going to get 5, you probably would want to get all these infantry units. You're not really just going to run around with a spearman speed. You're going to run at like 5, 6. Like, spearmen can keep up with chariot archers, but the other units can't. So, Fa just ends up being pretty pointless. Oh, and about that god power. Consider the radius, right? Like, even if mobility was a big factor, right? Even if you cared a great deal about that. Consider this factor. The limit at which you can transport, you know, units, like the radius over there. Sure, it can transport your entire army in a good position, to be sure, but I just don't really see Fa as being worthwhile in any way, shape, or form. Like, it's just really that Wadjet just not being a particularly great unit to use. To be sure, like, you know, if, like, let me just pump out a lot of Wadjets, because why not? We got the resources for it. Let's just go with that. And let's see how well these Wadjets are going to do over here. Oh, and also, this is the annoying thing. It's a big unit. One thing shouldn't be ignored. It actually is a big unit. So you might talk about like, oh, you can always get the mobile. Damn, it's awkward to use. Like, big units, big single entities like that can be a bit awkward to use, to be sure. But at least you know that the other units may have an inherent level of power to actually make that work, right? Whereas this big boy doesn't. Like, let's just send it against the entire enemy base and see how it is. And I'll even teleport more. Obviously, you would have, like, lines of spearmen and all that to support it. So it's like, you wouldn't just send, you know, a bunch of these guys on their own. So, but let's see how well these guys can handle themselves. Keep in mind, this is the lowest difficulty AI. But that is a good amount of Wadjets, and it's like they're just getting hammered. And it's not like these units are cheap. They're 15 favor. That is not a cheap cost. Then you can see that just a couple of Norse units were able to destroy them. Again, you do need to have tanks over here. It's not like the enemy here has a lot of anti-myth capability. They do not. Any other unit you could get, anything else you could spend this favor in particular. Like, this is the thing about crab myth units. It's not the same as having a bad human soldiers, because, you know, there is a place for spearmen. There is a place for axes. But a bad myth unit is consuming the most precious resource you have in the game, and that is, of course, favor. So you don't have that same kind of cost situation that you do in other cases, and that was a really, really bad trade over there. So yeah, that just doesn't really work out for the watch. Now, the alternative to all of this the Atlantean alternative. Like, Ptah can at least have some uses in some situations, to be sure, very limited ones at that. But there is one god that has almost no uses in any situation whatsoever. Beyond the fact that she is worse than the alternatives, she's just not that great even on its own. But consider Kronos' situation. You have Prometheus with a really good god power, a really solid unit over here, that is cheap but fairly durable, and it creates a bunch of Promethean offsprings. That's the benefit of Prometheans. It's not their own inherent combat power, it's all the offspring that can swarm your enemy. But then on top of that, he's reducing the time that it takes your heroes to become heroes, and he's also giving hero citizens a 20% economic benefit. And you will have hero citizens because of Valor. Compare that to freaking Leto. Leto is... I mean, I don't really know what Ensemble Studios was thinking with this one. Like, it's not a question of, like, the developers of Retold, right? It's a question of, like, what the hell was Ensemble Studios thinking here? Like, let's construct the upgrade. The only useful thing that she has is that she has Perception, which gives you 10% favor gathering rate. There is, of course, another upgrade as well, and that upgrade will increase, will reduce the amount of damage your human soldiers and automatons are taking by, 15%. So we look at, Mermillo doesn't have a good amount of pierce damage. You go from 10% to 24%. It's just because of the way the calculation is made. But here's the thing, while that can be useful in certain situations, maybe if you're dealing with centaurs, I don't know, what the hell do I know? If I'm dealing with centaurs, like, the problem is, Atlanteans don't struggle against range units early on, because they have the Terma. Like, even, ignoring the fact that, we can get this particular upgrade, we have the Terma, which alone is pretty damn good against any range unit. So that this upgrade kind of feels like, oh, you can make your human soldiers better against range. That is not the problem of the Atlanteans. It's their lack of melee combat power and infantry combat and anti-infantry combat power that is the real problem that they're dealing with in the early game. Oh, but you can get the warrior automatons. Okay, so they have almost 300 HP, 30% hack armor, 64% pierce armor with that upgrade, and 80%. The problem is they only do 11 damage, and that is freaking pathetic as a damage dealing capability. Like, genuinely pathetic. Oh, but they can repair each other. Yeah, if you're, like, the problem with automatons, their damage is bad. They're not great as tanks, because remember, myth units always have more HP because there's modifiers to deal with them. And so, like, the warrior automaton repairing all that, not great. The amount of damage they're doing, not great, and a 4.2 speed. Let me just give you a comparison over here. To understand just how worthless Leto is, let's go Prometheus, and let's consider, like, the situation that he might be dealing with in his game, right? So just gonna get a bunch of resources over here, get that temple very quickly, and go to H2 as Prometheus, right? And also get Manor, maybe. So we look at Prometheus over here. A regular Promethean has 60% hack armor, 25% pierce armor, so worse in terms of pierce armor, but we get to 210%. Keep in mind, both Prometheans and automatons are fairly cheap units, but the Prometheans have crush damage. That is one pretty substantial advantage, I would dare say. And yeah, but it's not just the Prometheans on its own. It's the entire freaking package that you're getting over here. Because, like, look at Valor. Like, just conserve Valor as an ability, right? Like, consider how, like, ignoring the fact that I can cast it pretty instantly over here. But, like, consider this. how many times you can use this thing and get an enormous level of combat power. Once you get to 10, that's kind of like the point where, you know, the cost is just gonna increase. But even then, like, you can use this a lot. Like, you should use this on cooldown because it is a really strong ability. So, compared, and even compared to Oceanus, it is not worth it. Like, compared to Prometheus, absolutely not worth it. Compared, but even against Oceanus, Leto's not worth it. She offers no real tangible benefits. You know, Ptah can at least give you a long-term farming benefit, and that divine damage on slingers isn't too horrible. But Leto gives you very little that you actually want. I mean, I imagine, like, I understand there's situations where you would take advantage of that extra pierce defense. I understand that, I comprehend that, but that's not really the problem that the Atlanteans face in their early game, or in their games at all. Like, if you're dealing with an opponent, one of the worst things you can do against the Atlanteans is try and beat them in range, because, yeah, they'll, like, Terma will destroy your range units, and they're more mobile than you. Like, the way you defeat the Atlanteans is you outraid them, and keep in mind the limitations of Terma raiding and all that. You outrade them. You don't try and smash them to pieces with range units. That's a really bad idea, especially if you're dealing with Gaia. So, Leto just doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. And that would be about it. Costin signing off.